All right, so let's get going on today's class. So what we're going to do today is we're going to continue our look at Chapter 2. We're going to stay on this chapter for a while because it's got three key concepts that we need to master before we move on. Last time we introduced the mean, and you're going to see when we get to variance, it includes the mean. So understanding the mean required an understanding of frequency distributions. Understanding variances requires an understanding of the mean. Understanding z-scores requires an understanding of variance and the mean. So we're going to build it up, but we're going to go back to the mean today so that we can see how to actually calculate those measures of central tendency that we introduced last time. So once again, we'll just have a quick recap about the main measures of central tendency, the mean, the median, and the mode. And then we're going to dedicate the rest of our time to in-class practice, where we're going to show you how to actually calculate those, as well as the promised shortcuts to help you speed up your Excel work. And then we'll also have time for extra practice, and I'll mention the homework assignment that you'll be ready to do after today. So once again, just to quickly recap, oftentimes we need measures of central tendency in order to make sense of data. So our human brains are horrible at understanding large amounts of numbers, large amounts of raw scores, and we need to usually boil it down to one or two numbers that gives us an idea or a picture of what's actually going on. So for example, our hypothetical example was that if the governor of Indiana wanted you to tell him how much resources, how many monetary resources does the typical university student have in Indiana, he doesn't want to hear about your tens of thousands of data points that you got from surveying tens of thousands of students. He needs one number so that he can make sense of the situation. And that's that idea of that representative single score. So we introduced three of the main measures of central tendency, those representative single scores used in psychology. By far the most used was the mean. So the mean is probably the one that you encountered previously. It's also known as the average. For a sample, the mean has capital M as its term for a population, the Greek letter mu. And this is the balance point for all the scores. This is literally, if you had to balance that frequency distribution, what point along those possible scores would you be able to balance that distribution? That's what the mean calculates. And the further away a score is, much like the further away a weight is on a scale, the more it tips the mean, and the more the mean has to move to readjust that balance point. The other one that we introduced, the second most popular one that's used in psychology, is the median. And for a sample, median is called median. For a population, median is called median, again indicating its lesser use and indicating the importance of the mean because the mean gets its special terms. And the median is the score where half of the scores are below the median and half of the scores are above the median. So the median just wants to know that the number of scores below it equals the number of scores above it. And it doesn't actually care what the scores are on either side of it, just so long as the number is the same to the left and to the right. And then the final one was the mode. And for a sample, it's referred to as a mode. For a population, it's referred to as a mode. And this is the most straightforward one, but also the least used one in psychology. And this is simply the score that has the greatest frequency. It's the most common score, the most popular score. The score that has the highest frequency is the mode for that distribution. And we also saw that these three different measures have different characteristics that make them more suited or less suited to particular situations. And we also saw how data can change the mean, the median, and the mode. So for example, we saw what would happen if Elon Musk became invested in the success of high schoolers in Indiana and decided that if they graduated, he would give them $60,000 a year to attend university. Once they graduate, we saw that they would massively move many of these measures of central tendency. So this was the mean without Elon Musk's highly funded students. But once they came in, that balance point is no longer the balance point once you add those scores at $60,000, once you add that weight. So that balance point moves, and we have now a new mean. And it's our jobs as psychologists and critical thinkers to take a look at that frequency distribution and ask ourselves, is that a true representative score now? Is just under $30,000 going to give people an indication of the typical amount that a student has access to, or should we look for another measure of central tendency? We saw that the median in this situation is going to be much less effective, so that's the median without Elon Musk's hyperfunded students. That's the median with his hyperfunded students. So again, the median just wants to make sure that the same number of scores are on the left as there are on the right, and it doesn't have to move very much in this distribution for that to occur. So the median is what's known as robust against outliers, these extremely high or extremely low scores, which the mean is rather sensitive to. And finally, we saw that the mode would not change at all in this regard because that previous score is still the most common, the highest frequency score. Was there a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I seem to remember, I might be wrong, but I seem to remember some research where the outliers were just removed and then the mean was taken. Is that something that we'll do as well? Just take out the outliers altogether?
Yeah, oftentimes in research, they will remove outliers, and that's a bit beyond the scope of this course, but there has to be like a definite criteria. So once we get into measures of variance, oftentimes they'll say any scores that have this much of a variance, they're going to be taken out. And that is usually done when there are studies that have a lot of outliers to them just because of their very nature. One of the typical psychology experiments that oftentimes has those outliers is reaction times, because more at a high enough frequency, people will fall asleep at the wheel, right? So if you're asking them to do a reaction time, they'll be like, ooh, half a second, ooh, quarter of a second, ooh, 100 milliseconds. Oh shoot, there it is, 6 seconds, right? So, and that happens often, right? Even if they're just kind of like, oh, my shoulder's itchy. Oh no, like where it's like 12 seconds. So that happens a lot in reaction time data. So they'll have rules in place to say we're going to get rid of these outliers. But at the same time, it's not a true measure of what's going on in that particular situation. But oftentimes in the real world, the outliers might be contributing that information. So one of the things that I always find interesting is to compare the mean and the median to each other. And even if you can't see the data, like if you don't have a frequency distribution, or if you don't have access to the data, much like we saw with the pay gap, the gender pay gap, when you compare means to medians, it does kind of show you where some of these issues lie. And I was just reading an article where the gender pay gap, if you didn't control for a position it was in some bank, Citibank, I think, or something, was something like 20%, women made 20% less. But if you did control for position, it was 99%. They actually made just like 1% less. And the issue is that women weren't as upwardly mobile in the corporation. So it was when you got to the higher levels that you really started to see the differences. And again, that is just something that comes out of understanding the characteristics of the central tendencies. And that's also a nice example of why that debate is still raging, because you would think it's the easiest thing in the world to just go ask people, how much do you make? And then take that average or take that mean. But big questions are, what should that measure of central tendency be? And then also, what does it mean? What is the cause? Is it sexist promotion policies, or is it, some other thing that, needs to be addressed? Yep.
I was confused in the homework, where they gave you like several options and which one would be best to use the median in. And I wasn't sure why like height wouldn't be in that, because there are basketball players that are like way above You know,
Yeah.
it was just 2 out of the 4. I was just confused as to why that was.
Height, we're going to get into this when we get into, I believe it's chapter 4, but for two reasons, the median wouldn't necessarily be used there. Number one, even though there are outliers, there are very few outliers at those high levels. That's why they're in the NBA, right? Because there's not a lot of 7-footers walking around, and I know this for a fact because as a person who's rather tall myself, that's part of my identity. And anytime I see somebody that's taller than me, I find myself just unconsciously straightening up. And I don't have to do that very often. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that when we get into the normal distribution, which is the bell curve, it's a very common distribution that occurs in our world. What we're going to see is that height is basically like this. So it's got outliers at the high end, but it's also got outliers at the low end. So in this case, if you have a symmetrical distribution like this, there's your mean, there's your median, there's your mode. So the normal distribution, they're all lined up. So if you have outliers on both ends, then that kind of cancels each other out, and you can use the mean.
So why would the example of children and like the number of children per household
You can't have negative kids.
different?
Yeah,
Have negative kids. Yeah.
that's the one. So you can't have negative kids. So you can have people who have no kids. So if we looked at the frequency and that's no kids, that's 1 kid, 2 kid, 3 kids. People that have no kids, I don't know what this is. I would imagine it would be something like this, and then you would have, the people with 14 kids over here. You can't go the opposite way. So those outliers are going to pull everybody this way. So you're more likely to get a better example using the median. But if you could have negative children, it's like, oh, I have, 4 negative children. Doesn't make any sense. But if you had them on the other side, then it would balance out basically the weights.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. And the same would be so for like. Okay. So more people would have fewer children, so you're gonna have most of the numbers stacked up on that side. Okay.
Yeah. So if you're looking for the typical amount of children that a family would have, most of them are going to have like 0, 1, or 2. I would imagine that would be your typical amount. So you would want your measure to be somewhere in this area. And if you found that people with 14, 10, 8 kids were high enough to start pulling that over to the point where you're like, oh yeah, the average is 4, right? On average, people have 4 children, and that's not typical at all. Then you need to use other measures of central tendency. All right, so that's actually a nice kind of discussion about some of the characteristics as well. So now let's go into how to actually calculate these. So if you haven't already, sign in Canvas. In your Excel sheets, you'll find Excel sheet number 5, practice, January 22nd, part 2, chapter 2, the mean. So this is going to be where we're going to practice calculating the mean. So let me just duplicate my screens here so we can see. I can see what I'm doing. Duplicate, keep changes. All right, there we go. So what you're looking for is you're looking for this one right here. So not the extra practice. We're just doing the first practice right now. So zoom to selection. This is the one that we're going to be doing. So if you already opened it up, great. If you haven't, I'll just explain a little bit while you're opening it up. So here we have 3 sets of scores. So we have and we saw these before, we have our X scores right there. We have our Y scores right there. We have our Z scores right there. So the same individuals were measured on 3 different variables. So again, something like mathematical ability, English ability, and musical ability. And then what we want to do is we want to calculate a mean, a median, and a mode for each of those. So we got a sample mean, median, and the mode here. So I'm going to show you how to calculate the sample means. I'm going to tell you how to calculate the population means, but at this point, the calculations are the same. So for this part, we're just going to introduce the idea of these separate formulas. Once we get to variance, though, that's where the formulas actually make a difference. But let's start off with calculating the means. All right, so we want the mean for the x-scores, we want the median for the x-scores, we want the mode for the x-scores, we want the same things for the y and the z-scores. So let's start off with the mean. So the mean, you put in equals, we'll put it in this cell over here. So you put in equals, that lets Excel know that you are going to give it a formula. The formula for the mean is average. So we write average out. And once again, you'll see that Excel is doing that really, really nice thing where it says, oh, just so you know, average returns the average arithmetic mean of its arguments, which can be numbers or names, arrays or references. The rest of that isn't important. But returns the arithmetic mean. That's what we want. So it's always good, especially in the beginning, to kind of just double check that description so that you know, so that it agrees with what you want it to do. Open up those parentheses, highlight your cells, close those parentheses, we hit enter, and we got a mean of 43.17. We're going to use the equals function to pop that into our answer cell, and we see that we got that one correct. Now this is an example of where it's important, if I remember correctly, not to do this manually, because if you do it manually, you get it incorrect. And the reason if you pop in 43.17 in there manually, you get it incorrect, is because that is not 43.17. That is 43.16666666666 all the way down. And the last thing you want to do when you're doing psychology and people's lives hang in the balance is to get lazy and get rid of decimal places where that error can accumulate and you end up making a conclusion that isn't the truth. So to make sure that we don't do that, always use the equal function, and that equal function will carry those decimals along with you as much as possible. So again, it's just our commitment to making sure that we get to the truth. Don't get lazy, don't round off if you don't need to. All right, so let's calculate the mean for the y-scores. So equals, average, open parentheses, highlight those y-scores, close the parentheses, hit enter. We got 50.08. Pop that into our answer cell, and we got that one correct. All right, so for the z-scores here, I'm going to show you an error that I guarantee you're probably going to make. I do this about once a week, and especially if I'm calculating other measures of central tendency. If I'm calculating medians and calculating modes, oftentimes I'll go to Excel and I'll say equals mean, open parentheses, highlight those cells because I want you to calculate the mean, close those parentheses, hit enter, and Excel goes hashtag name. What that means is that Excel does not recognize your formula. So if this happens to you, all you need to do is just highlight that cell, take a look at what you typed in. So all the way up there at that bar right up here, you can see that it goes, oh, equals mean, and then you're like, oh no, that's not what I want. So you can double click on your cell and then just kind of erase that, correct it, and then you get your correct answer. So Excel will let you know when things went south, and that hashtag name means that it does not recognize the formula that you gave it. So double check your formula, guarantee you it's your mistake on your end. But in this case, now we have the correct one. We use the equals function, highlight where we put the answer, enter it in, and we got that one correct. All right, everybody with me so far? All right, next one. The median. The median is actually really easy. The formula for median is median. So we put in equals, we type in median once again. We check out what Excel thinks we want to do. It says, hey, this will return the median, or the number in the middle of the set of given numbers. Excellent. Exactly what we want. Open those parentheses, highlight those cells, close it up, hit enter. We have a median of 44. Use the equals function to pop that into the yellow answer cells. And we got that one correct. Next one, we want the median for y, equals, median, open parentheses, highlight your y-scores, close them up. We get a median of 25.5. Pop that into our answer cell using the equals function. And then the last one, equals, median, open parentheses, highlight those z-scores, close those parentheses, and we get a median of 41. Pop that into our answer cells for the z-scores using the equals function, and we got that one correct as well. So you'll notice here that we're starting to get a little bit of information about what these distributions of scores are like, because if you take a look at our x-scores, our x-score mean and our x-score median are very, very close together. And what that indicates is that the x distribution is probably symmetrical, and it probably doesn't have a lot of outliers. However, our y-scores, our mean is twice as large as our median, indicating that it does have some high extreme scores. And the same thing with our z-score, again, indicating that it has those high extreme scores as well, those outlier scores. All right, last one here, the mode. So the mode is also extremely straightforward. It's equals mode. So don't worry about the mode.multi, mode.single. These are more complicated versions of the mode that will let you find the mode for a distribution that has a single bump, or for the multi one, a distribution that has many high frequencies, so like a multimodal, like a bimodal or a trimodal distribution. That's a little bit beyond what we need right here. We're going to use this one here, mode. So if we highlight that one, we can see that this function is available with compatibility, whatever. Returns the most frequently occurring or repetitive value in an array or range of data. So one of the nice things about Excel is that a lot of the functions are backwards compatible. And the really nice thing about that is that we're going to learn the sort of basic functions here in this class. And what that means is that if you go and after you graduate here, you get a job in the most high-tech company in the world, you will be able to use their Excel program. But if you also go to a job and you're working in a lab that hasn't updated its computers since the 90s, you will also be able to use Excel on those computers. And you would be surprised how many labs do not update their computers because their computers are hooked up to very expensive equipment that has been calibrated and programmed onto those computers. So those like 1990s computers are like guarded like sacred artifacts. And when I was working in the color lab at UNR, they had super old computers hooked up to like $30,000, $40,000 color machines. And to change out those computers was like, no, because it's all calibrated, it's all ready to go. Anyways, mode is mode. That was a long way of getting to this, but mode is mode. So we type in mode, open parentheses, highlight those cells, close the parentheses, and we find out that the mode of the X scores is 15, nowhere near the median, nowhere near the mean. So let's calculate it out for Let's calculate it out for the Y scores as well. Equals mode, open parentheses, highlight the scores, close the parentheses, we get a mode of 22. And finally, for the Z scores, equals mode, open parentheses, highlight those scores, close the parentheses, and we get a mode of 104. And then we pop those all up into our answer cells using the equal function, and we find that we got those ones correct as well. All right, so notice here, the mode is kind of all over the place. And this is something that oftentimes happens with data that has very few numbers of scores. So in this case, we only have 12 X scores. And 15 is the mode because it occurs twice. So if I was to look at this data and I was to say to myself, there's only 12 scores, I would say probably the mode is not one of the ones that we want to be using because it has so few scores that the mode is basically just going to be almost a meaningless measure. So again, just the kind of things that you need to consider when you're looking at measures of central tendency. All right, so has everybody achieved these scores here and put them in your answer cells, got 100%? Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at what happens when you introduce some outliers. So let's say that we were psychologists and we measured 12 students on their math ability, their English ability, and their musical ability. And then all of a sudden, a 13th student got added to our sample, and that 13th student just killed it, just rocked all the scores, maxed out on every possible score. In this case, scored 1,000 on each of those measures. What is this going to do to the mean, the median, and the mode for each of these measures? So what we're going to do right now is we're going to calculate that out, but I'm also going to introduce the idea of copying and pasting so that we can do all of this, start to do this a little bit faster. So one of the great things about Excel is that if you know you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, there are shortcuts in Excel that let you set it up once and then basically do it very, very quickly by basically copying and pasting it. So for example, here, we want the mean, the median, and the mode, and we want it for the X scores. We're then going to want to do the exact same thing for the Y scores. We're then going to want to do the exact same thing for the Z scores. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it up once for the X scores, and then we're going to use Excel's functionality to do it very quickly over and over and over again. So you do have to do it once. So we got here equals average, open parentheses, highlight the scores, including that new student with a score of 1,000, close those parentheses, and you can see that our new mean is 116. So that one score, that one student has taken our mean for math ability from 43 all the way up to 116. One student that was an outlier did that massive change, more than doubled the previous mean. What about the median? So we put in equals median, open parentheses, highlight those scores, including the 1,000, close those parentheses, hit enter, and we have a median of 53. Notice previously, our median was 44. So while the median has gone up because of this outlier, really hasn't gone up by that much, right? The mean has gone up by like 70 points. The median, on the other hand, has only gone up by, what do we got there? 9 points. So you can see this example, the median was much more robust, did not move as much for that score of, when we include the score of 1,000. And if we finally do it for the mode, equals mode, open parentheses, highlight those scores, close those parentheses, you'll see that the mode hasn't moved at all. So there's only one person that scored 1,000. 15 was the most frequent score at a frequency of 2. So the mode hasn't moved at all because of this new individual. All right, so does everybody have that? Okay. So one of the things that I mentioned is that when you know you're going to be doing the exact same thing over and over and over again, you can set it up once in Excel, and then you can basically tell Excel to just do that same thing over and over again. So here we calculated the average, and we calculated the average for the X scores, and we're going to want to do the exact same thing here for the Y scores. And we're going to want to do the exact same thing here for the Z scores. So what you can do is you can copy this formula and you can paste it into those new cells, and Excel will duplicate that formula and basically recalculate it with the new scores. So for example, I can copy that, and there's a number of different ways to do this in Excel. I'm only going to tell you about one way, the way that I use the keyboard shortcuts. You can, if you find your own way that you're more comfortable with, do it that way. There's a number of different ways to do this, but I kind of find if I throw 5 different ways at you right now, you'll forget all 5. But if I show you this one way, at least you'll have that way ready to go. Plus, it's a rather efficient way as well. So when you're on this cell that you want to copy, if you hold down Control and press C, that is the keyboard shortcut for copying. So Control C to copy the formula. Move it to where you want to go. Hold down Control, press V. That's the keyboard shortcut for paste. So Control V to paste. And you can see that we have now calculated the Y scores mean. So there's the mean for the Y scores with that outlier. And we can continue this as long as this cell here has that little kind of billboard lighting effect going on there, kind of that marquee lighting effect going on there. As long as it's doing that, that means that that cell is copied and ready for pasting. So we can go to where we want to calculate the z-scores, and once again, press Control V, and it calculates out the z-scores. So now we have very quickly done the same calculation 2 times, setting it up once, and then very quickly copying and pasting it to do it those 2 other times. And this will work with any function in Excel where you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So even for something as simple as the equals function, we can put the equals function into our answer cells to put our answers up in the equal function, and then we can copy that, Control C, move it over 1, paste. We get that correct. Move it over 1 again, paste. We get the z-score mean correct. So you can do it with any function in Excel. You can set it up first and then copy and paste that function, and Excel will literally take the function and the arguments that it's been accessing, and it'll move it to wherever you want it to go. So the power of this is actually rather, once you get kind of used to it, you can use it to very much increase the efficiency of your Excels. So once again, I want to do the median for the y and the z-scores. I've already calculated out the median. So if I highlight that formula and I go Control C, I can move it over 1, Control V, move it over again, Control V, and now I've calculated the median for the y-scores and the z-scores. I can also do that for the mode, Control C to copy, move it over 1, Control V to paste. We got the mode for the y-scores, move it over 1 more, Control V to paste. We got the scores for the mode for the z-scores. And then to put it all into the answer cells, you can copy multiples at a time. So you can even go, all right, I want all 3 of those, but I want them moved down 1. There's the medians, sorry. I want to move down 1, there's the modes. So you can do this rather quickly once you kind of get a little bit of practice with this. So if I was doing this for my own work, I would say, all right, I want to do the mean, the median, and the mode 3 times. So let me set it up once. Let me copy all of those formulas. Boom, there they are. And then I'd go up here, copy it across, copy it down, and you're done very, very quickly. So try, we're going to see a few more things about copying and pasting, but I would highly recommend to try to do and get used to copying and pasting, because what it does is it basically allows you now to do what you've been practicing. So it's important to get that practice so you don't forget what these formulas are, but it gives you that opportunity to kind of speed up and get much more efficient with Excel, which means that whenever you're working on a stats problem, especially in a timed environment like an exam, you can spend less time entering things into Excel, and you can spend more time thinking about what it is that you should be doing. So the faster you get at Excel, the more time you're going to have to sit there, read a question, and say, what should I do? Let me take a moment. Okay, and then just boom, 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 and you got it done with Excel. All right, so is anybody still working on example number 1 with the outlier? Has everybody got these scores or 100% on their thing? You still, yeah?
I didn't catch how you did it with the answer key. I was thinking about while you were doing that.
Sure. So again, for the answer key, the general principle is that when you set up a formula with Excel, it takes a look at where the formula is, and it takes a look at where the arguments that the formula accesses is. These are the scores that are being used in this formula. And when you copy and paste this, it takes the whole thing and it moves it to wherever you want it to go. So that's the power of these formulas. So if we have an equals function and we put it up in the answer cell here, and we say, all right, we want the mean of x, and the mean of x is right down there, then what this formula is saying, that equals function, is it is literally saying I want that cell to be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 down. So it's literally saying go 5 to the left, 14 down, make this cell equal to that. So because this structure here is parallel to this structure here, that means that Y's answer for the mean is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 down. So we can use the same function and just move it over 1 and say to Excel, all right, do the same thing, go 5 across, 14 down, and we'll get your Y score. And then you can do it for the Z score. Do the same thing, move 5 across, 14 down, and get your Z score. And then you can even paste it down because the median is 1 below where the mean was for the X scores. The median answer is 1 below where the mean answer was for the X scores. So you can copy that, Control C, just go down, Control V, and paste that. Control down and get the same thing for the mode. And then you don't have to do them one at a time. You can actually copy and paste as many formulas as you want. And you can populate your entire, for example, answer cell here rather quickly and still have them accessing the correct answer cells. Let me see.
I copy and paste from here, or do I do?
No, so put an equals function in there. So first you have to set it up. Okay. So we get the equals function. And now copy that. And then paste it there. There you go. Yep. Because what you were doing, if you copy and paste this, then you're literally saying from here, look above, find all these numbers, which doesn't exist. That's probably why you're getting an error. Yep. All right, so let's try that one more time. But this time we're going to do it with these scores over here. And this is going to highlight one additional thing that I want you to start getting into the habit of doing when you're doing your copying and pasting. So let's set up the average first, the mean. So we spell it correctly, equals average, open those parentheses, highlight the cells, close the parentheses, and we have the average. And we know we want to do that 3 more times. So we can highlight that formula, Control C, move it over, Control V to paste. We get the average for the mean for the Y scores, 32.31. Move it over again, Control V, we get the average for the Z scores. Pop that up here in our answer cells. And we can copy our answer cells as well because it's got that nice parallel structure. And we see that we have all of those correct. If you don't have those green answer cells to tell you that you've gotten things correctly, one of the things that I want you to get into the habit of doing when you are copying and pasting, especially at the beginning, is whatever you copy and paste, highlight that cell and take a look to make sure that you're still accessing the information that you think you're accessing. Make sure that when you copied and pasted it, Excel is now using the new set of scores that you wanted it to use. So just a quick little double tap can reveal that, yep, that average for the Y scores is exactly the numbers that I wanted to include, and that average for the Z scores is exactly the numbers that I wanted to include as well. So we'll do this again for the median, equals median, open parentheses, highlight those scores, close those parentheses, we hit enter, we get a median of 12. We can copy that, Control C, paste it, Control V, paste it again, Control V. And because we still have, because we still have our answer cells up here, we can actually copy our entire set of answer cells, move it down 1, and paste it. And once again, while you're doing this, while you're learning this, I highly recommend just kind of double click on some of these and say, all right, let me just test that Y median. All right, yeah, it's accessing the scores that I wanted to access. And let me also double check that answer cell. Let me just double click on there. Oh yeah, it's still accessing where the answer is. So always in the beginning especially, double check your copy and pastes so that you don't make an error or you don't miss numbers that you need to use in your calculations. So one last time, we'll take a look at the mode equals mode, open parentheses, highlight the cells for the mode, close those parentheses. We want to do the same thing for the y-scores and the z-scores. So Control C to copy, Control V to paste, Control V to paste one more time. And then we got to enter it into our answer cells. But again, we got that nice parallel structure where the answer cells are in the same configuration as where we put the answers. So we can copy that entire thing and paste it down. We know we got it correct because this is a demo, but if those green answer cells were not there, just a quick little double click will tell us, yep, we're accessing that mode for the y-scores. Quick little double click here. Yep, we're accessing that mode for the z-scores. And are we actually accessing the correct numbers? Quick little click. And again, we see that, yes, we do have all of those z-scores. All right, any questions on that? We're all good? All right. Last one we're going to show, and then we're going to turn this over to practice time, is the need to plan ahead for what it is that you're going to be doing. And this is what this demo here is designed to do. So let's zoom in so you can see the whole thing here. All right, so example number 3 here. This time we got X scores, but we got fewer X scores than we have Y scores, and we got fewer Y scores than we have Z scores, right? So it's as if only 12 subjects finished the X score measure. So we only got math abilities for 12 subjects, but we got English abilities for 14 subjects, and we got music abilities for 16 subjects, right? Sometimes that happens. Not everybody finishes every test. I'm going to do it wrong the first time. So don't follow me, well, follow along, but don't do this yet, just to kind of show you what could go wrong. So for example, if I said to myself, all right, well, I want the mean, the median, and the mode of the X scores, and I want the mean, the median, and the mode for the Y scores, the mean, the median, and the mode for the Z scores, so I'm going to use the power of Excel and copy and pasting formulas. So I go in here, I go equals average, highlight those X scores, close the parentheses, I got the average for the X scores, equals median, highlight those X scores, close the parentheses, I got the median, equals mode, highlight those X scores, close the parentheses, I got the mode, and let's pop them into our answer cells. And we see that we got that one correct, and then we copy and paste the answer cells, and we got the other 3 correct. We got the correct mean, the correct median, and the correct mode. I might say to myself, all right, I want to do that 2 more times. So I'm going to copy these formulas and paste them here for the Y scores, and I'm going to paste them here for the Z scores, and then I am going to take these answer cells, and I'm going to paste them there, and something went off the rails, right? Something here did not go well. So what was it? What was it that I did incorrectly? Well, what I did incorrectly was clearly the copying and the pasting. And this is where it's very important to remember what it is that Excel is doing when you ask it to copy and paste. It is taking the cell with the formula and its relationship to the cell where the scores are, and it's moving that around exactly in a fixed orientation, right? It's moving this around wholesale, and it doesn't split it up or expand anything. It just keeps moving it wherever you put it. So what happened was I set up my X scores correctly here, and I could see that it said take the average of these cells over here, start up here and go down here. So basically it's saying ignore 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cells above me, and then take the next 12 and calculate the average. When I copied and pasted that, Excel says, all right, I'm going to do the exact same thing, and it missed 2 of the Y scores. So this is basically because Excel did exactly what I asked it to do. I asked it to do the same thing that it did for the X scores, for the Y scores, and the X scores only had 12 scores in it. So it said, all right, I'm going to take the top 12 Y scores, and I'm going to ignore those other 2 scores. And the problem gets even worse when we double click here on the z-scores, where now we've missed 4 of those scores. So this is one of the reasons why when you're learning how to do and practicing how to do copying and pasting in Excel, make sure you're double clicking on your copies and pastes, because that will let you know rather quickly that, oh no, something went wrong here because it's ignoring those 4 scores. All right, so again, if you just double and click on any of these ones for the Y's, for the Y scores and the Z scores, you'll notice again that we're missing those scores. Incidentally, we see here another errors message, this hashtag NA. And hashtag NA means that Excel cannot calculate that formula. So in this case, in the mode, it means that there is no mode because there is no most frequent score. So hashtag name means that it doesn't recognize the formula. Hashtag NA means that it can't calculate it. It's basically like you asked me to divide by 0. I can't do it. All right, so we messed up. So what do we do here? Well, we start again. That's the first thing we do. But then the thing that you can do here is that you can still copy and paste, but oftentimes it requires a little planning ahead. It requires a little strategy. And one of the things you can do in this case is you can take a look at the score that has the most scores in it. Which variable here has the most scores in it? And in this case, it's the z-scores. So if we start there and we go, okay, equals average, and we open up the parentheses and we highlight the z-scores there, we can see now that we have the correct z-score. So I've left the answer cells, they'll automatically update. But you can see now that we have the mean for the z-scores correct. We can now copy that formula, paste it to where the y-scores are, and you'll see that now we have the y-scores correctly measured as well. And if we double click on the y-scores, on the formula for the average for the y-scores, you can see that we are including all of those scores. For mean, medians, and modes, and actually for all the formulas that we're going to be using in this semester, Excel will ignore empty cells. So those 2 empty cells there, Excel totally ignores it. It says, hey, there's nothing there, so I'm not going to count it. But notice that by planning ahead, we now included all of the y-scores. We're not missing any, and that's why we got our mean correct. So we can then copy and paste, do the same thing for the x-scores. We see that we got that correct. Highlight those x-scores. And once again, we're accessing some empty cells, but importantly, we're accessing all of the x-scores. Mm-hmm.
If I want to exit out of, like I want to double click to check,
yep.
I want to exit out, I just push enter, so I'm not messing up my copy.
Yeah, the easiest way to get out of the double click is just to press enter. And that's usually the easiest way to get out of any cell, because occasionally, if you double click on something and you click in the wrong space, right? Let's say that you end up here and you click on another cell. No, didn't work there, but occasionally Excel will think you're trying to get it to highlight a different set of scores. So usually when you double click in and you want to get out, enter is the best way to do it, especially if you're using the equals functions. If you put in equals here and you click anywhere else, Excel is going to be like, oh, you want me to be equal there? So if you are double checking that equals function, hit an enter, that'll get you out without changing where the equals function is accessing. All right, so once again, here we got median. We want to do median 3 times. So we think ahead, we set it up so that when we copy and paste, it'll work for each of the 3 variables. So we go to the z-scores and we say, all right, you got the most scores. So let me set it up first, equals median, and we'll highlight all the scores that you have, making sure strategically that when we copy and paste that, it's going to cover all of the y and all of the z scores. And then we can copy and paste that. We see that we got the the y scores and the x scores correct. But always in the beginning, just double click. Double click on that formula and just make sure that it's still doing what it is that you want it to do. And then finally, equals mode, open parentheses, highlight the cells for the z scores, close those parentheses. We got the correct mode now. Copy and paste it across. but double click and just make sure that, especially in the initial stages where you're doing your copying and pasting, you get that, that double check to make sure that it's accessing the right cells. All right, any questions on any of that? What we're going to do right now for the rest of the class is turn it over to practice time. So we got just about 20 minutes. So you have extra questions left over in this practice Excel sheet. And then you also have an extra practice Excel sheet where you can continue to practice on your measures of central tendency, but very importantly, practice that copy and paste, because the power, your efficiency with Excel is literally going to like triple overnight if you can get very comfortable with that copy and paste rather than having to, you know, put in the formula every single time. So it's as if me, as Mr. Miyagi, said, all right, you've been painting the fence with your brush. Here's a paint roller, right? To get you can do it 3 times as fast. It's you're allowed right now. I didn't show this right away because I wanted people to get a lot of practice with Excel, but now's the time to move on to the next step. So when you're doing your homework, when you're doing your practicing, as much as possible, try to look for opportunities to practice that copy and paste. So it might actually in the beginning be faster for you to write in equals average, open the parentheses, highlight the cells, and close them. But it's to your benefit to try to practice that copying and pasting so you can get rather quick and rather comfortable with using that. And again, in the beginning stages, just do that little double click. Make sure that you're still accessing the cells that you want to access, and then that will help make sure that you don't make any errors. All right, so just a reminder in terms of the MyStatLab study plan, go to the Quiz Me options in the study plan. You're looking for earning those mastery points, so continue to work on those. They, again, are going to be due by the first exam, so keep practicing on those if you're not getting 100% on your pretest. And then even if you are getting 100% on your pretest, not a bad idea to see what the study plan has identified as possible weaknesses in your statistics ability and practice those. In terms of the homework assignment, you are now ready to complete homework assignment number 3, chapter 2, part 1. And again, use Excel as much as you can for this particular homework assignment. Some of these questions, they're going to give you 5 scores. And they're going to say, what's the mean for these scores? And I know that it's probably going to be faster for a lot of you just to take out your calculator on your smartphone and be like, okay, 5 scores divided by 5, boom. Some of these you're going to be able to visually see the median. So they're going to say, here's 5 scores. What's the median? Not too hard to be like, that's the middle one. But resist that temptation. Put in a little bit of extra time. Practice that Excel because it's going to pay dividends as we go through this course. The faster you can get on Excel, the more time you have to think about the stats later on. All right, so that's all that I wanted to cover today. The rest of the class today is dedicated to practice time. So once again, as usual, if you're kind of statsed out and you've, your brain has had enough, completely understand, call it an early day. On the other hand, everybody else, if you want to continue on with the Excel practice, start up your homework, for example, I will be available until the end of class to help out anybody that might need assistance.